The metal chair felt cold against Kyle's scaled back. He shifted his forearms, trying to find a comfortable position in the small interview room. The walls were white and clean, with no windows. Only a single light hung from the ceiling, casting shadows across his silver skin. Dr. Unipak sat across from him. She was small, like most humans, with dark hair pulled back and kind eyes behind thin glasses. Her hands moved over a tablet, recording everything they would say. Kyle watched her careful movements and wondered how such fragile creatures had changed the galaxy forever. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Commander Morvex," Dr. Pack said in her soft voice. "The Galactic Coalition wants to understand what happened during the war. Your experiences will help us learn from this conflict." Kyle nodded slowly. His yellow eyes studied the human woman. 3 months ago, he would have killed her without thinking. Now she sat in front of him, asking polite questions about how her species had defeated his. The irony was not lost on him. "Where would you like me to start?" Kyle asked. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "From the beginning. When did you first encounter humans in battle?" Kale closed his eyes for a moment. The memories came flooding back, whether he wanted them or not. "It was on New Sol, a farming colony in the Outer Rim. We thought it would be easy." Dr. Pack typed something on her tablet. "What made you think that?" "Humans were new to space travel. Your technology was primitive compared to ours. We had been fighting wars across the galaxy for thousands of years. You had barely left your home system." Kale's secondary arms twitched slightly. Intelligence reports said New Sol had maybe 50,000 colonists. Farmers, families, children. No military base, no fleet protection. "So you expected no resistance?" "We expected panic. Maybe some desperate civilians with hunting rifles. That's what we always found with new species. They would see our ships and surrender, or they would run and hide." Kale paused, remembering. "Humans did neither." Dr. Pack leaned forward slightly. "What did they do?" "They fought." The words came out harder than Kale intended. "Not like any species we had encountered before. When other races saw our superior numbers and firepower, they would calculate their chances and make logical decisions. Retreat, surrender, negotiate. But humans..." He trailed off, staring at the white wall behind Dr. Pack. She waited patiently for him to continue. "I commanded the 47th Assault Wing. 8,000 warriors. The best the Vorthak military had to offer. We had conquered 47 worlds. New Sol was supposed to be number 48. Kyle's primary arms clenched into fists. "It should have taken 6 hours. How long did it actually take?" 3 days. The admission came out like a physical pain. 3 days to defeat 50,000 farmers. Dr. Pack made more notes. Kale noticed she was left-handed, writing with quick, efficient strokes. Everything about humans seemed efficient, he had learned. They wasted nothing, not time, not resources, not lives. "Tell me about the first day," she said. Kale's mind drifted back to that morning. He could still smell the burning crops, still hear the sound of plasma weapons cutting through the air. "We came down in the pre-dawn hours. Standard assault formation. The plan was simple. Surround the main settlement, demand surrender, and when they refused, demonstrate our superior firepower until they changed their minds." "Did you try to communicate with them first?" "Of course, we are not monsters, Dr. Pack, despite what your propaganda might say. We always offered terms. Surrender, accept coalition rule, and your people would be relocated safely to designated zones. It was more mercy than most conquering species offered." Dr. Pack looked up from her tablet. "What was their response?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Captain Jin Wu was the leader of their defense force. We intercepted his response to our surrender demand." "What did he say?" "He said, 'You're come and take it.'" Kale's yellow eyes met Dr. Pack's brown ones. 3 words. That was all. And then they opened fire. Kale stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. All 4 of his arms moved restlessly as he paced the small room. Not warning shots, not defensive positions. They attacked us. Dr. Pak watched him pace. That seems like a logical military response. No, you don't understand. Kyle turned to face her. They were outnumbered 160 to 1. Their weapons were chemical projectiles and crude explosives. Our armor could stop their bullets. Our shields could deflect their rockets. Any rational commander would have known it was suicide. But they attacked anyway. Kale sat back down, his movements agitated. Captain Jin Woo led the first assault himself. 100 human soldiers against my advance guard of 5,000. They should have been wiped out in minutes. What happened instead? Kyle was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of something Dr. Pak couldn't identify. Respect? Fear? They hurt us badly. How? They didn't fight like soldiers, they fought like... Kale searched for the right words. Like every single one of them had something to protect that was more important than their own life. Dr. Pak stopped typing. Can you explain what you mean? In Vorthak culture, warriors fight for glory, for conquest, for advancement in rank. We understand these motivations. They make sense. But these humans, they fought for their families, for their friends, for strangers they had never met. I watched soldiers throw themselves in front of plasma blasts to save medics. I saw farmers pick up weapons from dead defenders and charge our lines with no training, no hope of survival. Kyle's secondary arms began to tremble slightly. Dr. Pak noticed but said nothing. There was one moment, Kyle continued, when our forces had surrounded a group of human defenders in a farm building. They were out of ammunition, wounded, outnumbered. We called for their surrender. Did they surrender? A young woman stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old. Blonde hair, blue eyes, covered in blood and dirt. She was carrying a white flag. Dr. Pak leaned forward. She was surrendering? We thought so. My lieutenant prepared to take prisoners. But then she spoke. Kyle's voice became very quiet. She said, "My name is Hana Lee. These are my people. You want them, you have to go through me." She was negotiating? No. Kale's yellow eyes seemed to glow in the artificial light. She was buying time. While she talked, her people were escaping through a tunnel they had dug during the siege. She knew she was going to die. She knew we would kill her as soon as we realized what was happening. But she stood there and faced 800 Vorthak warriors alone. Dr. Pak's pen had stopped moving. What happened to her? She fought. Kyle's voice cracked slightly. One human girl with a broken rifle and 3 grenades against 800 of us. She lasted 14 minutes. 14 minutes? 14 minutes of constant combat. She used every piece of cover, every shadow, every trick she could think of. She killed 47 of my warriors before we finally brought her down. Kale was shaking now, all 4 arms trembling. 47 seasoned soldiers dead because one human girl decided her friends' lives were worth more than her own. Dr. Pak set down her tablet. Are you all right, Commander? Kyle tried to steady himself. By the time we realized what she had done, the other defenders were gone, vanished into the countryside. 23 humans escaped because of what she did. And this was just the first day? This was the first 6 hours. Kyle's voice was barely above a whisper. We thought it was an anomaly. Exceptional courage from an exceptional individual. We were wrong. What do you mean? Every human on that planet fought like Hana Lee. Every single one. Men, women, young, old, soldiers, civilians. They all fought like their lives meant nothing, and their cause meant everything. Dr. Pak picked up her tablet again, but her hands were shaking slightly too. How did the battle end? We won, eventually. Overwhelming firepower always wins in the end. But the cost... Kyle stared at his hands. We lost 6,000 warriors taking New Seoul. 6,000 of our best soldiers defeated by farmers and shopkeepers and teachers. That's a significant loss. It was more than significant. It was impossible. No species had ever inflicted such casualties on a Vorthak assault force. The military command was furious. They thought I had made tactical errors, shown poor leadership. Had you? Kyle looked at Dr. Pak with something like surprise. No. I had commanded perfectly, by every tactical manual we had. The problem wasn't my leadership. The problem was that humans don't follow our tactical manuals. What do you mean? Every military doctrine is based on the assumption that soldiers will act rationally. They will preserve their lives when possible, retreat when outmatched, surrender when defeat is certain. Humans do none of these things. Dr. Pak was writing again, trying to capture every word. How did this change your approach? It didn't at first. High Command declared New Soul an aberration. They said the next human world would fall normally once word of our victory spread and human morale broke. But it didn't work out that way. Kale's laugh was bitter and harsh. No, Dr. Pak. It did not work out that way at all. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the recording equipment. Dr. Pak could see that Kale was struggling with the memories, his scaled skin, shifting color slightly from silver to a duller gray. Would you like to take a break, Commander? Dr. Pak refilled her coffee cup from the small machine in the corner of the interview room. The bitter smell filled the air as she sat back down across from Commander Kyle. His gray skin had returned to its normal silver color, but his yellow eyes still held shadows of pain. Are you ready to continue? She asked softly. Kyle nodded. Firebase Busan, you need to understand what happened there. Take your time. Kyle shifted in his chair, all forearms moving restlessly. We arrived at dawn on the 15th day of the human month you call October. Intel showed a simple supply depot built into a rocky hillside. 3 warehouses, a landing pad, basic defensive walls. Nothing special. What was your battle plan? Standard siege formation. Surround the facility, cut off escape routes, demand surrender. When they refused, we would demonstrate our firepower until they changed their minds. Kyle's voice was steady now, but Dr. Pak could see tension in his movements. It should have been over in hours. But Colonel Min-Soo had other plans. Colonel Min-Soo sent a single message in response to our surrender demand. Just 2 words. Come on. Kale's laugh was bitter. Not, come and take it like Captain Jin Woo on New Seoul. Just come on, like he was inviting us to a friendly competition. Dr. Pak made notes on her tablet. What was your first move? Artillery bombardment. Standard procedure. Soften the defenses. Demoralize the enemy. Create openings for assault troops. Kyle paused. We fired for 3 hours straight. Enough firepower to level a city block. What happened? Nothing. The humans had built their defenses into the rock itself. Underground tunnels, reinforced bunkers, hidden firing positions. Our bombardment barely scratched them. So you sent in ground forces? Kale's primary arms clenched. Yes. First wave, 500 warriors. Elite assault troops with full combat armor and plasma weapons. Against 200 humans with chemical, projectile weapons. It should have been easy. It should have been a massacre. Kyle's voice grew quiet. It was. Just not the massacre we expected. Dr. Pak looked up from her tablet. What do you mean? Lieutenant Soo Jin was the chief engineer of Firebase Busan. A small human female, maybe half my size. While we were setting up our siege lines, she was turning her supply depot into a death trap. How? Improvised explosives, booby traps, hidden gun positions. She used our own tactics against us, but with a creativity we had never encountered. Kale's secondary arms began to twitch. Every doorway was mined. Every corridor had hidden shooters. Every room we entered became a killing zone. That sounds like standard defensive tactics. No, Dr. Pak. Standard defensive tactics are predictable. They follow patterns, rules, logical progression. What Lieutenant Soo Jin created was chaos, beautiful, terrible chaos. Dr. Pak waited for him to continue. She had rigged the warehouses to collapse in sequence. Not all at once, which would have been logical. In sequence, so that each collapse would drive my forces toward the next trap. She had turned their own supply depot into a weapon against us. How many casualties did you take in the first assault? Kyle was quiet for a long moment. 327. Out of 500. Dr. Pack stopped writing. Over 60%? 65.4% to be exact. Kale's voice was hollow. In the first 6 hours of combat, against an enemy with inferior weapons and technology. How did you respond? I called for reinforcements, and heavy weapons, and air support. Kyle stood up and began pacing again. I threw everything I had at that worthless supply depot. Everything. But the humans kept fighting. They kept fighting. For 18 days they kept fighting. Kale's voice grew stronger, tinged with something like admiration. Every day we would launch new attacks. Every day they would find new ways to stop us. Tell me about the defenders. Kyle stopped pacing and looked directly at Dr. Pack. There was Sergeant Tae-ho, explosives specialist. He turned their entire perimeter into a minefield, but not with standard mines. With improvised devices made from supply depot equipment, kitchen timers, maintenance tools, even children's toys from the commissary. Children's toys? Remote-controlled vehicles loaded with explosives. He would drive them right under our assault vehicles and detonate them. We lost 16 armored transports to what your people call toy cars. Dr. Pack couldn't help but smile slightly. That's very creative. Creative. Yes, that's the word. Kale resumed pacing. Everything humans did was creative. We had battle plans, tactical manuals, thousands of years of military doctrine. Humans had imagination. What else do you remember? About the defenders? Private Kyung-soo, communications officer. When we cut their main transmitter, he rigged a replacement using spare parts and metal stripped from damaged equipment. He kept Firebase Busan in contact with human command for the entire siege. That must have been important for morale. More than important. Essential. Kale's voice grew softer. We intercepted some of his transmissions. He wasn't just sending tactical reports. He was sending personal messages, letters to families, jokes to boost morale, news from other battles. What kind of news? Human victories. Other colonies that had successfully resisted coalition forces. He would broadcast these stories to his fellow defenders, reminding them that they weren't fighting alone. Dr. Pak looked up. Were these stories true? Kale met her eyes. Some were. Others. He shrugged. Others were what humans needed to hear. Private Kyung-soo understood something about war that we didn't. Victory isn't just about tactics and firepower, it's about hope. Tell me about the daily fighting. Every dawn brought new attacks. We would probe their defenses looking for weaknesses, and every dawn they would be ready for us. Kale's secondary arms started shaking again. They never slept, Dr. Pak. How do you fight an enemy that never sleeps? They had to rest sometime. They took shifts, perfectly coordinated shifts. When one group rested, another took their place. Their rotation was so precise that we never found a moment when their defenses were weak. That requires exceptional discipline. Exceptional trust, Kale corrected. Each defender had to trust that their comrades would protect them while they slept. That kind of trust. We don't have that in Vorthak culture. Dr. Pak made more notes. What was the turning point? There wasn't one. Not really. Kyle sat back down, his movements heavy. Every day we would gain a little ground. Every night, the humans would take it back. It became a routine, a deadly, senseless routine. But something changed on day 18. Kale's skin began to shift toward gray again. Yes, something changed. What happened? We intercepted a transmission from human command, an evacuation order. The civilian convoy Firebase Busan was protecting had reached safety. The supply depot had served its purpose, so the humans could withdraw. They could have, should have. Any rational military commander would have ordered an immediate withdrawal. Kyle's voice became very quiet. Colonel Min-soo was not rational. What did he do? He sent a message to my command ship. Just 4 words. Mission accomplished. See you. Dr. Pak felt a chill run down her spine. See you? The humans weren't withdrawing. They were preparing for a final stand. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Why? Kyle's yellow eyes met hers. Because they had hurt us. Because they had shown the galaxy that humans couldn't be easily conquered. Because they wanted to send a message. What message? That every human position would cost us dearly. That there would be no easy victories. That we would pay for every meter of ground with Vorthak blood. Dr. Pack set down her tablet. Tell me about the final day. Kyle was shaking now, all 4 arms trembling. We knew they were planning something. Our sensors detected movement inside the base. Energy readings. Preparation. What kind of preparation? Master Sergeant Daun was the senior non-commissioned officer at Firebase Busan. A career soldier, 20 years of service. She had been wounded 3 times during the siege. Her left arm was in a makeshift sling, shrapnel wounds across her face and chest. But she was still fighting. She was planning. Kale's voice cracked. While we were preparing our final assault, she was preparing hers. The humans attacked you? At dawn on the 19th day, every remaining defender at Firebase, Busan left their fortified positions and charged our lines. Kale's voice was barely above a whisper. 200 humans, many of them wounded, against 8,000 Vorthak warriors. That's suicide. That's humans. Kyle wiped his eyes with a secondary hand. Master Sergeant Daun led the charge herself, one arm in a sling, carrying a rifle in the other, shouting orders and encouragement to her troops. What were they trying to accomplish? Damage. Maximum damage with their final act. They knew they were going to die. They wanted to make sure we remembered them. Dr. Pack found herself holding her breath. What happened? They broke through our first line, then our second line. Master Sergeant Daun fought her way to within 50 meters of my command post before we brought her down. Kale's voice was shaking now. 50 meters. 1 wounded human woman against an entire division. How long did the final battle last? 4 hours. 4 hours of the most intense combat I have ever experienced. When it was over, all 200 humans were dead. And your casualties? Kyle was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with shame. 1,500. 1,500 warriors killed or wounded by 200 suicidal humans. Dr. Pack could barely. The lights in the interview room flickered for a moment as the space station adjusted its power systems. Kale barely noticed. His yellow eyes stared at the white wall behind Dr. Pack, seeing memories instead of metal. Luna Base, he said quietly. Humanity's oldest off-world settlement, built inside the craters of Earth's moon. Dr. Pack had made fresh coffee, but it sat untouched on the table. What made Luna Base important? Strategic position. Luna Base controlled all traffic to and from Earth. No ship could reach the human homeworld without passing through lunar space. Kale's primary arms moved restlessly. High Command decided that taking Luna would force Earth's surrender. Cut off the head, and the body dies. But humans don't think like that. No, they don't. But we didn't know that yet. Kale's skin began to shift toward gray again. We assembled the largest fleet in Coalition history. 500 ships. 200,000 warriors. The pride of 6 different species, all united in conquest. That's an enormous force. It was meant to be overwhelming. After Firebase Busan, High Command wanted to make sure there would be no more embarrassing delays, no more unexpected resistance. Dr. Pack typed notes on her tablet. Who commanded the human defenses? Admiral Ji Hai. I studied her file before the battle. 30 years of space service. Veteran of the Centauri border wars, known for aggressive tactics and innovative strategies. What was your impression of her? Kyle was quiet for a moment. Dangerous. Even on paper, she seemed dangerous, but High Command dismissed my concerns. They said no human admiral could stop 500 coalition ships. What was your role in the battle? I commanded the assault fleet. 50 ships, elite crews, the best warriors the Vorthak military could provide. My orders were to break through Luna's defenses and establish a landing zone for ground forces. Standard military tactics. Yes, standard, logical, proven tactics. Kyle's laugh was bitter. Humans don't follow standard tactics. Dr. Pack waited for him to continue. We arrived at Luna in perfect formation. 500 ships in coordinated attack waves. Our sensors showed 43 human vessels defending the moon, 43 against 500. Those are terrible odds for the humans. We thought so too. Admiral G. High sent us a transmission as we approached weapons range. What did she say? Cale closed his eyes, remembering. She said, "Welcome to Luna, gentlemen. I hope you brought enough ships." That sounds like confidence. It sounded like insanity. 43 ships against 500? Any rational commander would have withdrawn to Earth's orbital defenses, made us fight through multiple defensive lines. But Admiral G. High stayed at Luna. She stayed, and she fought. Cale's voice grew harder. The first surprise came when we entered the outer defense perimeter. Hidden weapon platforms, dozens of them built into asteroids and debris fields around Luna. Camouflage defenses? More than camouflaged. Invisible. Our sensors couldn't detect them until they started firing. Captain Young Ho had designed them, himself. Stealth technology we didn't know humans possessed. Dr. Pack looked up from her tablet. Captain Young Ho? Destroyer captain. His ship was called the Soul's Pride. An old vessel, pre-war design, barely half the size of our smallest frigate. Kyle's secondary arms began to tremble. He shouldn't have been a threat to anyone. But he was. He was brilliant. While we were focused on Admiral G. High's main fleet, Captain Young Ho was hunting our supply ships, cutting our logistics lines, disrupting our formation. Hit-and-run tactics. Guerrilla warfare in space. His destroyer would appear from nowhere, strike fast and vanish before we could respond. In the first 6 hours of battle, he destroyed 8 of our support vessels. That must have been frustrating. It was impossible. Our ships were faster, better armed, better shielded, but Captain Young Ho fought like he knew something we didn't. What did he know? Cale met Dr. Pack's eyes. He knew he was going to die. He had accepted it completely. That gave him a freedom we couldn't understand. Freedom? Freedom from fear. Freedom from doubt. Freedom from the need to survive. Cale's voice grew quiet. When you're not afraid to die, you can take risks that no rational being would consider. Tell me about those risks. On the second day of battle, Captain Young Ho's destroyer was badly damaged. Weapons offline, shields failing, engine room breached. Any reasonable captain would have withdrawn for repairs. But Captain Young Ho didn't withdraw. He accelerated straight toward our flagship, Cale's hands clenched into fists. A destroyer against a dreadnought. It should have been suicide. Should have been? The Soul's Pride rammed the Vorthak battleship Eternal Glory at full combat speed. Both ships were destroyed instantly. Kyle's voice was barely above a whisper. 3,000 coalition warriors died in that collision, all because one human captain decided his life was worth that trade. Dr. Pack stopped typing. He sacrificed himself? Sacrificed? No, Dr. Pack. That word is too small for what Captain Young Ho did. He transformed himself into a weapon, turned his entire ship into a missile aimed at our heart. What was the effect on your fleet? Chaos. Our formation broke apart. Ships scattered to avoid similar attacks. For the first time in coalition history, a space fleet fled from a single enemy vessel. But Captain Young Ho was dead. Yes, but his sacrifice had a purpose. While we were regrouping, Admiral G. High launched her main assault. Dr. Pack leaned forward. Tell me about Admiral G. High's attack. Kyle stood up and began pacing again. She divided her remaining ships into 3 groups. Each group attacked a different section of our fleet simultaneously. Classic divide and conquer strategy. No, not classic, insane. Each group was outnumbered 10-1. It should have been massacre for the humans. But it wasn't. It was. Just not the massacre we expected. Cale's secondary arms shook violently. Every human ship fought like Captain Young Ho. Every captain was willing to trade their life for maximum damage to our fleet. What happened to your assault fleet? Destroyed. 50 ships, elite crews, the best the Vorthak military had to offer. All destroyed in 6 hours by 18 human vessels. Dr. Pak couldn't hide her shock. 18 ships destroyed 50? 18 ships commanded by 18 Captain Young-Hos, each one willing to die. Each one finding a way to take as many of us with them as possible. How did they do it? Ramming attacks. Suicide runs. One Captain Commander Nari piloted her crippled carrier directly into our ammunition depot ship. The explosion destroyed 7 vessels and damaged 12 others. She killed herself to damage your fleet. She killed herself to save Earth. Commander Nari knew that her carrier was finished. Engines dead, weapons gone, life support failing. But she also knew that her ship still had momentum. So she used it as a weapon. She used everything as a weapon. Her ship, her crew, her own life, all transformed into tools of war. Kale stopped pacing and faced Dr. Pak. Do you know what her last transmission was? What did she say? She was singing. As her carrier crashed into our depot ship, as the explosions tore both vessels apart, Commander Nari was singing a human song. What song? I don't know the name. Something about home. About protecting the people you love. Kale's voice cracked. She died singing about home. Dr. Pak felt tears forming in her own eyes. What happened after the ammunition depot was destroyed? Our fleet was crippled. Half our ships were damaged or destroyed. The survivors were scattered across Luna's orbital space trying to regroup. But the battle wasn't over. No. Admiral G. High still had 25 ships operational. We had over 200. Kyle sat back down heavily. She should have withdrawn to Earth, made us fight through the inner solar system defenses. But she didn't withdraw. She attacked. Again. 25 ships against 200. And somehow, impossibly, she was winning. How? Perfect coordination. Every human captain knew exactly what their comrades were doing. They moved like parts of a single organism. While we were still trying to reform our battle lines, they were already among us. Fighting at close range. Fighting at point-blank range. Plasma cannons firing through each other's hulls. Boarding parties crossing between ships in the middle of combat. It wasn't space warfare anymore. It was a knife fight in the dark. Dr. Pak made more notes, though her hands were shaking. Now. What was your position during this phase? I was aboard the command ship Vorthak's Pride, flagship of the entire invasion fleet. We should have been safe in the center of our formation. Should have been? Admiral G. High had other plans. While the rest of her fleet kept our ships busy, she led a personal attack on our command vessel. She attacked your flagship directly? With a single cruiser, the Earth's Daughter, a medium-sized vessel against our massive dreadnought. Kyle's skin had turned completely gray now. It should have been no contest. What happened? Admiral G. High fought like a goddess of war. Her ship danced around ours, striking at weak points, exploiting every gap in our defenses. She knew our ship better than we did. How is that possible? Intelligence, preparation, study. While we were treating humans like primitive savages, Admiral G. High was learning everything about Vorthak technology, tactics, and weaknesses. Did she damage your flagship? She crippled us. The Earth's Daughter destroyed our main engines, our primary weapon systems, our command center, all with surgical precision strikes. But your ship survived? Barely, and only because Admiral G. Dr. Pak had ordered food from the station commissary, but neither she nor Kale had touched the meal. The alien warrior sat hunched in his chair, all 4 arms wrapped around himself like he was trying to hold his body together. His silver skin had remained gray for hours now. The Battle of Earth, Dr. Pak said softly. Tell me what you remember. Kale's yellow eyes focused on her with difficulty. I remember everything. Every ship. Every explosion. Every human who died because of my orders. You were following orders yourself. That's what I told myself then. It was a lie. Kyle's voice was rough, like his throat was raw from screaming. By the time we reached Earth, I knew what humans were capable of. I could have refused, could have found a way to avoid that battle. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Kale's primary arms clenched into fists. High Command gave me a new fleet, 200 ships, fresh crews who hadn't fought humans before. They thought inexperience would be an advantage. Why? Because experienced crews were afraid. After New Seoul, after Firebase Busan, after Luna, every warrior who had fought humans carried fear in their hearts. Fear of an enemy that didn't follow any rules we understood. Dr. Pak poured herself more coffee, though her hands shook as she held the cup. What were your orders? Simple. Take Earth, force humanity's surrender, end the war through overwhelming victory. Kale's laugh was bitter and hollow. High Command thought that humans would finally act rationally when their homeworld was threatened. They were wrong. They were catastrophically wrong. Kale stood and began pacing, but his movements were erratic, unsteady. We approached Earth expecting massive orbital defenses, fortress stations, defensive fleets, weapon platforms. What we found was different. What did you find? Emptiness. No defenses around Earth itself. No orbital stations. No defensive fleets. Kale's voice grew puzzled. Just the planet, turning slowly in space, apparently defenseless. That must have seemed suspicious. It should have. But my inexperienced crew saw easy victory. They thought the humans had abandoned their homeworld, evacuated to safer systems. But you knew better. I knew humans don't abandon anything. Ever. If Earth looked defenseless, it was because humans wanted it to look defenseless. Dr. Pak leaned forward. What was the trap? There was no trap. That was the trap. Kale stopped pacing and faced her. Earth wasn't defended because every human ship in the galaxy was already racing toward us. From where? Everywhere. Every colony, every outpost, every mining station, every merchant vessel, ships that had been scattered across dozens of star systems, all converging on Earth. How many ships? Kale's skin grew even grayer. At first count, maybe 30 vessels. Old ships, converted civilian craft, obsolete military vessels that should have been scrapped decades ago. Against your 200 ships? Yes, 30 against 200. We should have destroyed them in minutes. Kyle's voice cracked. But then more ships arrived, and more, and more. How many total? I stopped counting at 500. They just kept coming. Ships I had never seen before. Designs that weren't in any intelligence database. Vessels that looked like they had been built in someone's garage. Improvised warships? Improvised everything. Cargo haulers with missile pods welded to their hulls, passenger liners converted into carriers, mining ships loaded with explosives. Kale's secondary arms began shaking violently. Humans had turned their entire civilian fleet into weapons. That's incredible logistics coordination. It was more than logistics, it was love. Kale's voice broke completely. Every human in the galaxy had dropped everything they were doing to defend Earth. Not because they were ordered to, because they wanted to. Dr. Pak set down her coffee cup. What was your first engagement? A converted passenger liner called the Seoul Express. Captain Bin Woo commanding. His ship had been carrying tourists between Earth and the Centauri colonies when the war started. What did he do? He loaded his passenger compartments with missiles, turned his entertainment decks into gun positions, converted a luxury cruise ship into a flying fortress. Kale's voice grew quiet. And he fought like Admiral Ji Hai. Aggressively, suicidally, the Seoul Express charged straight into our formation. No tactics, no strategy, just pure determination to do as much damage as possible before dying. Did he succeed? He destroyed 4 of our frigates before we brought his ship down. 4 military vessels destroyed by a tourist liner. Kale wiped his eyes with a secondary hand. Captain Bin Woo died at his post, still firing his improvised weapons. What happened next? The pattern repeated. Every human ship fought the same way. No surrender, no retreat, no mercy, just maximum violence, until their ship was destroyed. That must have been devastating for morale. It was devastating for everything. My crews started to panic. These weren't trained military opponents, these were shopkeepers and teachers and farmers, flying cargo ships and passenger liners, And they were winning. Dr. Pak couldn't hide her amazement. Civilian vessels were defeating military ships? Not defeating, destroying. There's a difference. Kyle resumed pacing, his movements agitated. Captain Sun Hee commanded a mining vessel called the Iron Mountain. She had loaded her cargo holds with refined metals and industrial explosives. Making her ship into a bomb? Making her ship into a guided missile? The Iron Mountain rammed our command carrier at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. She killed herself to damage your fleet? She killed herself to save her world. Captain Sun Hee had 3 children living on Earth. Her sacrifice bought them time to reach the evacuation shelters. Where were the professional military forces? Mixed. In with the civilians. Human military doctrine had changed completely. No more separate military and civilian sectors. Everyone was a soldier. Everyone was a weapon. Dr. Pak made notes, though her hands were shaking. How long did the battle last? 6 days. 6 days of continuous combat. Wave after wave of human ships, each one willing to die for Earth. What was the worst moment for you? Kyle stopped pacing. His entire body was shaking now, all 4 arms trembling uncontrollably. The school ship. School ship? The Knowledge Seeker, an educational vessel that normally carried students on field trips to other star systems. Commander Yoon Young was the captain. A school ship joined the battle? Commander Yoon Young had evacuated all the students before the fighting started, but she kept her ship in the battle zone. Kyle's voice was barely audible. She was rescuing survivors, human survivors from destroyed ships. She was a rescue vessel? She was saving lives while we were taking them, flying through the middle of combat, pulling survivors from damaged ships, treating wounded civilians in her medical bay. That sounds like a mercy mission. It was. But my weapons officer didn't see it that way. He saw a valid military target and opened fire. Dr. Pak felt her stomach clench. You attacked a rescue ship? We destroyed it. Completely. Commander Eun Young and her entire crew killed while trying to save lives. Kale collapsed back into his chair. That was the moment I understood what we had become. What had you become? Monsters. We were killing people whose only crime was trying to help others. We had become the evil that humans were fighting against. What did you do? I tried to order a ceasefire, tried to contact the human commanders and arrange a truce for rescue operations. Did they accept? They couldn't hear me over their own rage. When word spread through the human fleet that we had destroyed a rescue ship, they went insane. What do you mean? Every human ship in the battle zone converged on my flagship simultaneously. Not in formation, not with tactics, just pure fury made manifest. Dr. Pak could barely breathe. What happened? My ship was the Vorthak's Revenge, newest dreadnought in the Coalition fleet. Shields that could stop anything, weapons that could destroy planets. Kale's voice became a whisper. Humans tore us apart with their bare hands. I don't understand. Boarding parties, dozens of them. Human crews abandoned their dying ships and crossed space in environmental suits, carrying nothing but hand weapons and hate. They boarded your ship during battle? They invaded us. Deck by deck, corridor by corridor, room by room, fighting with rifles, pistols, knives, tools, anything they could find. Kyle's yellow eyes were wide with remembered terror. I had never seen such fury. What were they trying to accomplish? Revenge for the Knowledge Seeker. Justice for Commander Yoon Young. They wanted to look into our eyes as they killed us. Did they succeed? They reached the bridge. 20 human. Marines led by Colonel Han Newell. My bridge crew was 40 of the finest Vorthak warriors in the galaxy. What happened? The humans won. Colonel Han Newell killed my weapons officer with her bare hands, the one who had fired on the rescue ship. And then she looked at me. Just looked at me. I was the enemy commander, the one responsible for everything. She could have killed me easily. But she didn't. She said something I didn't understand at the time. You're going to live with this. Then she turned around and led her Marines off my ship. Dr. Pak was crying now, tears streaming down her face. They spared you? They spared all of us. Every coalition survivor. Colonel Han Newell's Marines could have slaughtered my entire crew, but they chose mercy instead. Why? Because that's what Commander Un Young would have wanted. The woman whose death had driven them to such fury, she would have wanted mercy. What? Dr. Pak had turned off the recording equipment. The official interview was complete, but Cale remained in his chair, staring at his four hands with an expression of profound confusion. His silver skin had returned to its normal color, but his yellow eyes still held depths of pain that might never fully heal. The hardest part, he said quietly, is not the guilt. It's the understanding. What do you mean? Dr. Pak asked, settling back into her chair with a fresh cup of coffee. For my entire life, I believed in Vorthak superiority. We were stronger, faster, more advanced. We had every right to conquer weaker species. Cale's voice was soft, almost wondering. But humans showed me that strength has nothing to do with muscle or technology. What does it have to do with? Choice. The choice to put others before yourself. The choice to fight for something bigger than your own survival. Kyle looked up at her. Every human I encountered made that choice. From Private Hana Lee on New Seoul to Commander Yun Young on the Knowledge Seeker. Dr. Pak nodded. That's what we call the human spirit. I thought it was madness at first, tactical insanity. What kind of rational being throws away their life for strangers? Kyle's laugh was soft and sad. Now I understand it's the most rational thing in the universe. How so? Because what survives when the individual dies? What lives on when the body fails? Cale spread his forearms wide. Love survives. Memory survives. The impact you have on others survives. You've learned to think like a human. I've learned to think like a person. There's a difference. Cale stood and walked to the small window, in the interview room. Outside, stars wheeled slowly past as the station rotated. Vorthak think like warriors. Humans think like families. Dr. Pak joined him at the window. What will you do now? I don't know. For the first time in my adult life, I have no orders to follow, no battles to fight, no enemies to conquer. Kyle's reflection looked back at him from the transparent metal. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. You mentioned wanting to visit Earth. Yes, but not just for the memorial. I want to understand how humans live when they're not fighting for their lives. I want to see what peace looks like. What do you think it looks like? Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Children playing without fear. Families eating together. People working to build things instead of destroy them. His voice grew wistful. I've never seen any of those things. You could learn, could I? Could a species that has spent 10,000 years conquering others learn to live in peace? Cale turned from the window to face her. Could I? Dr. Pak smiled. The fact that you're asking that question gives me hope. Hope for what? Hope that this galaxy is big enough for all of us. Hope that former enemies can become friends. Hope that my children will grow up in a universe where different species work together instead of fighting each other. Kale's yellow. Eyes brightened slightly. You have children? A daughter. She's 8 years old. Her name is Soo-Jin. Soo-Jin. Like Lieutenant Soo-Jin from Firebase Busan? Named after her, yes. That lieutenant saved thousands of civilian lives with her engineering genius. I wanted my daughter to have a name that represents courage and intelligence. Kyle was quiet, processing this information. Your daughter will grow up knowing that her species faced down the entire galactic coalition and won. She'll grow up knowing that different peoples can find ways to live together peacefully. That's the lesson I want her to learn from all this. What if other species see humans as a threat now? What if they unite against you out of fear? Dr. Pak considered this. Then we'll have to prove that we're not the monsters they think we are. We'll have to show them what humans are really like when we're not fighting for our survival. And what are humans really like? Curious, creative, compassionate. We explore because we want to understand. We create because we want to share beauty. We help because we care about suffering. I saw the curious part during the war. Human tactics were endlessly creative, endlessly surprising. Kyle managed a small smile. But I never saw the compassionate part until Colonel Ha-Nul spared my crew. That's who we really are. Everything else is just what we become when we're threatened. It's strange. The qualities that made humans so terrifying in war are the same qualities that make you hopeful in peace. How do you mean? Your willingness to sacrifice for others. In war, it made you unstoppable. In peace, it could make you the galaxy's greatest healers. Dr. Pak hadn't thought of it that way. That's a beautiful way to look at it. I've had a lot of time to think during this interview. 3 days of reliving the worst memories of my life, but also remembering the best moments. What were the best moments? Every time a human showed mercy when they could have chosen vengeance. Every time someone like Commander Yoon Young chose to save lives instead of take them. Every time your people proved that they were better than us. You're not giving yourself enough credit. You chose to end the war. You chose peace over victory. Only after seeing what the alternative would cost. Only after understanding that we could never defeat humanity because we were fighting the wrong war. What kind of war were you fighting? A war for territory and resources, but humans were fighting a war for meaning, for the right to exist as free beings, for the chance to love and be loved without fear. Dr. Pak nodded. And meaning is always stronger than territory. Always. Because territory can be lost and regained. Resources can be depleted and replaced. But meaning is eternal. They stood together at the window, watching the stars wheel past. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different cultures, united by their shared desire to understand how peace could grow from the ashes of war. Dr. Pak, Kyle said quietly. Yes? When I visit Earth, when I go to the memorials, what should I say? How do I apologize for something so terrible? You don't apologize for the war, you honor the sacrifice. You promise to make sure it meant something. How do I do that? By living differently. By choosing peace when you could choose conflict. By protecting instead of conquering. By loving instead of hating. Kale nodded slowly. By becoming the person those humans died believing I could become. Exactly. It won't be easy. My people will think I've gone insane. The coalition will probably put me on trial for treason. Are you willing to face that? For the chance to help build a galaxy where species like mine never threaten species like yours again? Yes. I'm willing to face anything. Dr. Pak smiled. Then you've already become that person. Have I? The Kale who commanded the assault fleet would never have asked that question. He would have demanded glory and honor and victory. You're asking how to serve others. That's the difference between a warrior and a protector. A protector. I like that better than warrior. So do I. Kyle turned from the window and faced Dr. Pak directly. I have one more request. What's that? When you write your report on this interview, when you tell the galaxy what happened during the war, will you include something for me? Of course. What do you want me to say? That not all coalition species supported the war. That many of us were just following orders, just doing what we had always been taught was right. That we're not all monsters. I'll include that. And will you tell them that we're willing to learn? That we want to be better than we were? I'll tell them that too. Thank you. They shook hands, human and alien, former enemies now working toward the same goal. Outside the window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the species that moved between them. There's one more thing, Dr. Pak said as they prepared to leave the interview room. What's that your question earlier? About whether there can be peace after such violence. The answer is yes, but only if people like you and me are willing to work for it. Then that's what I'll do, for the rest of my life, however long that might be. How long do Vorthak typically live? About 400 years. I'm 63 now. Then you have plenty of time to help build a better galaxy. We have plenty of time. Dr. Pak smiled. Yes, we do. As they left the interview room together, both carrying the weight of terrible memories and the hope of a peaceful future. Neither noticed the small recording device that Dr. Pack had left running. Their final conversation, their moment of connection, across the vast divide of species and culture, would become part of the historical record. Future generations would study that moment, when a human doctor and an alien warrior chose understanding over hatred, cooperation over conquest, hope over despair. They would learn that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of people willing to choose a better way. And perhaps, in some small corner of the galaxy, a human child named Sujin would grow up in a universe where different species worked together to explore the stars, to create beauty, to protect each other from the darkness between worlds. It was a future worth fighting for. It was a future worth living for. It was a future that began with two people talking in a small room, surrounded by stars, choosing to trust each other despite everything that had come before. The war was over. The peace was just beginning.